guys, Rob from Royal Bolt. We're back in my own snake room today. I've got some video footage of feeding. Not exactly a feeding video. The thing that I want to focus on here is feeding response of my snakes. When I first got into ball pythons, I watched a lot of videos, and ball pythons have this reputation for being picky eaters. I watched many feeding videos, and you offer the snake the food and it's will it eat, won't it eat, will it, maybe, maybe not, you know, really picky, and they have this reputation for being picky. We're out here in the tropics and I keep my snakes slightly differently. I don't have any heat mats out here, there's no hot spots. They're kept probably at a warmer temperature than they would be in a temperate climate. The hot spot is the ambient, which is about 89, 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and there is no cool area, so they're kept warm. And the thing to focus on is the feeding response. I'm not showing a video of snakes eating. I think everybody's seen that. I feed frozen thawed. I feed once a week. This video was not staged. I haven't starved my snakes for 2 or 3 weeks in order to get this video. In fact, I shot this video last week and didn't have time to edit it, and it was in 2 parts. So I shot it again this week in a single part, and it was much easier to edit. So these snakes were all fed last week. My protocol for feeding is to defrost. I feed most of my snakes frozen thawed, and I feed half on one day and half on another day. So you're going to get to see half of the snakes being fed. So I defrost outside the room. The rats are taken out of the freezer and I defrost outside the room. I leave them for several hours at ambient temperature, and then just before I feed, I warm them up in a bucket of warm water. It's sort of bath water temperature, it's hand hot, and I warm them up for about 10 minutes, and at that point I bring the rats into the snake room so that the snakes can smell. Their behaviour changes completely almost instantly. Snakes have a very sensitive smell, and it doesn't take very long. They're opportunistic feeders, they're ambush predators, they're primed to take food whenever it passes by. And I think a lot of the times we forget that whilst snakes are predators, they're extremely vulnerable if they get caught in the open. They're also prey, so in daylight, in an open area, a snake would not be comfortable. It would be prey to birds of prey, cats, pigs, anything that wants to come along and eat it. They're very secretive creatures, and so you won't find them hunting in that environment either. They eat rodents, and rodents are very fast, they have extremely good reactions, and they have very good eyesight. So again, like all predators, they have certain adaptations that give them advantages in certain circumstances over their prey. In the open, a snake would never be able to catch a mouse. If you've ever run through a field and tried to catch a mouse yourself, you know how difficult it is. It's impossible. So these snakes are ambush predators. They have an extremely sensitive sense of smell, and they also have heat pits. They're very sensitive to warm-blooded animals, so they do hunt in the dark. Mice and rats can't see so well in the dark. Snakes can see perfectly well in the dark, so they have that adaptation, which gives them an advantage, an edge over their prey. So instead of becoming vulnerable to predation, they are actually predators themselves, but only on their turf, under their terms. So I'm going to open a tub here now, and I'll open this one because this is a snake that you will see in the feeding video that behaves very differently when there's a smell of rats in the room. So I'll open this tub here. I don't have to be particularly careful. And here she is, and I can reach in and pick her up. I can take her out of the tub. And she is a typical ball python. She's very docile, very handleable. Just a typical adorable snake. No issues with handling this snake. You're not going to get bitten. It's behaving like a normal ball python. So I just thought I'd show you that so that you can contrast that with the behavior of this exact same snake on feeding day. I watched a video recently by Predator BP, Richard. was at Tony Wilson's, and Tony Wilson feeds his snakes to mimic the way that they would naturally feed in the wild. So he feeds his animals on not necessarily to a strict schedule, and he feeds them odd-sized prey. Sometimes they get big prey, sometimes they get small prey, just as they would in the wild. And snakes are perfectly well adapted to that kind of feeding regime. They have physiological adaptations that allows them to take a meal and absorb a lot of the nutrients from that meal into their livers. Their livers swell up to a much larger proportion, and they can live from that reserves of nutrients for weeks if they have to. But they'll never turn down a meal. They are opportunistic feeders, and if a mouse or a rat comes by, they have to take that opportunity when they get it. And it doesn't matter what size the rat is. If the next rat coming along is not going to be for 3 or 4 weeks, it doesn't matter what size the rat is, they're going to have a go. So he mimics that, and he also feeds in the dark. My snake room is dark most of the time, but the snakes do know when it's daylight or not. And again, what we're doing there is mimicking the snake's natural advantages over its prey, so that it can use its heat pit to detect prey and actually be able to catch it at an advantage during the night. I think the important thing as far as the snakes go is that for most people it's just getting them to eat. If we can get them to eat on a regular basis and they're healthy, that's good. And I think you'll see from my feeding video here, the feed response of these guys, I think it will be absolutely lethal to come in this snake room at night and try and feed my snakes at night. That would be, I would get bit. I would get bit a lot, as you'll see from their feeding response. So let's take a look at the video, have a look at the feeding response. It makes me giggle when I do it. I think feeding snakes is exciting. The strike and the awesome speed and power of these animals is just so awesome to behold, and it makes me giggle. I hope it makes you giggle as well. So we'll take a look at the footage, and after we've seen the footage, we'll come back and talk about perhaps some of the reasons why these snakes behave a little bit differently to some of the snakes that I've seen on other feeding videos. Okay, let's get to it. Ready. This one. Already. This one. Oh no, that's the clown. She's under the paper. It. This little girl here, you need to be very careful. Down at the bottom, running out of appropriately sized rats here, so they're going to have to get bigger ones. feed for this guy. Yes, that one's hungry. Careful, 9 fingers here. Ooh. Straight away. Whoa. Who says ball pythons are fussy eaters? Got one more here that's going to eat that's not in shed. Oh. Yes, 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 go back in your cage. Go back. Oh man. How am I going to do this? Yes, pull it up from that side. Whoa! Who's going to eat this one? Yes. Got the GHI. Who's going to eat? That's this guy here. Done. Okay guys, so as I said, the video was not staged. These snakes were fed last week, believe it or not. It only takes about 5 minutes from bringing the rats into the room to turn from the sort of behaviour that you just saw from this snake to turn this room into a total war zone. You would not go opening tubs when there's a smell of rats in the room because you would get bit. Their response is, I'd say, ferocious compared to snakes that I've seen in temperate climates where you know, the owner is wiggling the rat in front of the snake and it's looking at it and trying to make up its mind, will it, won't it? You see my snakes behave totally differently. And I think part of the reason for that is barometric pressure. I'm here just a few degrees from the equator in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and our barometric pressures are the equivalent of what would be a high pressure all the time in a temperate zone. The barometric pressure here is about 1010 millibars every single day. We don't get tropical depressions. The cyclones and hurricanes and stuff that you see are more they're more in the tropics, Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn, about 30 degrees north, 30 degrees south, excuse me. The weather systems actually originate on the equator and then spin off, so they're always moving away from us, so we don't get these periods of low pressures and depressions, and the snakes are pretty much on it all the time. I feel that the snakes are actually quite sensitive to barometric pressure, and if you get a low pressure zone coming through, it kicks in a breeding response, but it switches off their feeding response, and it can take them several days to recover from that feeding response. They also digest their food very rapidly here in the tropics. Like I say, I don't have heat mats. Their whole tub is a hot spot. It's at 90 degrees or so. They have to curl their water bowls if they want to cool off a little bit. So typically they are digesting faster. They do poo about once a week, and I think that's part of the reason why their feed response is so strong. I don't have to feed at night. I think it's a great idea that we do try to mimic the natural environment of these animals, but again, as I say, my snake room is dark most of the time, and I think it would be absolutely lethal for me to try and feed these snakes in the dark. I would get bitten. The snakes that you saw being fed are pretty much my grow-ons. They're not my big breed of females, most of which are off food at the moment because they're gravid. But when they're building and they go through that stage where they're absolutely ferocious on food, I leave it to your imagination as to what a 2-kilo ball python does when it feeds with the same feeding response that these guys do. And trust me, they do. They come flying out of the tubs. You have to be extremely careful when you open the tub because the snake is right there, and it will come leaping out of the tub and bite the first heat signature that it sees, which is usually your hand. So I have to exercise slightly different protocols when I feed my snakes. You saw that I was opening the tubs very cautiously and putting my hand underneath so that the snake can't see me coming and has a target to strike at, because invariably the snake is right at the entrance to its tub, and it will come flying out and bite me. And in fact, the previous week, the little girl down here, I opened the tub and she came flying out and just took a bite of my finger, which really startled me because it's extremely fast. So I hope you found this interesting, guys. There are differences. We do try to mimic the natural environment of the snake, but I think a lot of the issues, as I say, from feeding ball pythons in temperate climates, I simply don't see it here. These snakes are just hot to trot and on fire every single feeding day, and they're on it. That's probably the difference between living in the tropics and trying to mimic a tropical environment in a temperate zone. So that's what I think is going on, guys. I hope you find it interesting. I hope it gave you a giggle, because it certainly gave me a giggle, and we'll see you next time.